what I saw on the first day, on that day, we just knew it's a coup. It was still a few hours before the first killings started by the military. And what we saw in the street is that people were happy. It felt like people have been holding their breaths for way too long, and that they were happy that it's time that we're gonna go into this fight.
So we rallied on the north steps of the Capitol, and it was small because of the rain, but the people who came out are the most dedicated and wonderful people.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. We want to start out with a positive note, so we're going to talk about the resistance to the coup in Sudan. Sudan is a large country in Africa, about 3 times the size of France. It has suffered through 30 years of dictatorship and an internal genocide in Darfur. But then there was a revolution in 2019. For more, we go to an online Zoom panel.
What we are seeing now may be considered a second wave of the Sudanese revolution that began in December 2018 and overthrew Omar al-Bashir's 30-year rule, then quickly also overthrew the next military installed Ibn Auf and demanded a civilian government. The Sudanese revolution was connected to the uprisings, was and is connected to the uprisings across the Middle East and North Africa that began in 2011. And Sudan's was one of the strongest due to the leadership and centralization under the Sudanese Professionals Association and its strong unions that managed to shut down the economy time after time. But after a massacre by the military in June 2019, an intense pressure by counter-revolutionary states, as well as some contradictions on the ground, the Forces for Freedom and Change made an agreement with the military in the summer of 2019 that brought about a dangerous impasse to the struggle. This past Monday, the military staged a coup to attempt to retake complete power. And since then, millions of Sudanese have come out in protest, barricaded the streets, and returned to general strike.
The moderator then introduces the first speaker.
Muzan Alneel, she's calling in from Khartoum. She's written and spoken extensively about the Sudanese revolution and is co-founder of the Innovation, Science, and Technology think tank for people-centered development in Sudan.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction, which summed a lot of the details of what happened over the past 2 years. What I will try to do over the few coming minutes is to share some observations from the ground that I think are useful to understanding the full situation. As Shireen mentioned, on October 25th, we woke up to a coup, actually, as early as 4 a.m. News started circulating about the detention of the civilian ministers. And it was about 5 a.m. when we lost all internet connection. And the national television was showing music. And we've been through enough coups to know what happened. By around 6 a.m., when we were out in the streets, we were not alone. Actually, you could see thousands of people already in the streets, building barricades and burning tires, which is, the traditional expected actions in case of a coup in Sudan, and what people have been already saying that they will do in case of a coup. Actually, the earliest strike that was announced was the bankers' strike at around 7 a.m. And the reason that they were this early to announce their strike is that they've already pre-announced it weeks ago, expecting a strike. The bankers have already put out a statement that in case of expecting a coup, in case of a coup, they will be in a strike. And they managed to actually put that in action as they heard the military marches and the military music on television. People were out in the streets, and I think one of the things that are missed and not it's not really possible to convey it just by news is how people felt and what is the vibe. How was it like? How was the vibe in the street? And what I saw on the first day On that day, we just knew it's a coup. It was still a few hours before the first killings started by the military. And what we saw in the street is that people were happy. It felt like people have been holding their breaths for way too long, and that they were happy that it's time that we're gonna go into this fight. And it's what we usually call a delayed battle. That this was a delayed battle that was held for too long. People were ready with their chance, and the chance were, they were celebrating the fact that we are here finally. This was the feeling in the streets at that time. Barricades were being built. People were crossing the bridges from one side of Khartoum to the other to come, all of them, to the center of Khartoum or downtown Khartoum. And many of them actually went to the area of the previous sit-in, which took place in 2019, which is the area around the military headquarters. And that's where the killing started.
Hope you got some of the early words of Muzan Alneel. What we saw in the streets were people who were happy, people who had been holding their breaths too long, people who were happy we were going into this fight. And now some of the remarks of the second speaker.
And we also have Rabab and Elnaiem, who is a member of the Sudanese Workers Alliance for the Restoration of the Trade Unions. And she will be our second speaker.
I want to start first by acknowledging glory to the martyrs of Sudan, and long live the struggle of the people of Sudan. I'm very, very, very excited, very happy to hear the voice of Muzan. And not just because of she's Muzan, to hear the voice of someone from home right now. On behalf of the Sudanese Worker Alliance for Restoration of Trade Unions, I thank you all for your solidarity. And I'm excited to build camaraderie and to exchange and build lessons that will help advance the struggle of the working class. Like Muzan mentioned before, there is literally no coup without local and regional and international support. But we should not just stop at acknowledging that support. We should track the financial interest, economical interest behind that support. And there is many in Sudan. One example we can mention is the international conflict on the Red Sea and the race to build military bases in the Red Sea. With that, we would see that a couple of days before the coup, Hemeti and Burhan met as the American envoy for Horn of Africa, and they came out with like this statement trying to protect whatever is called democratic transformation. And I think this is the key word that we need to think of, and that we all need to like stop and think, what do we mean by democratic transformation? And how we can achieve that, and who's trying to protect it from who. Because this is literally, although what's happening right now in Sudan is very scary, although we are in a disbelief, but like Muzan mentioned, we're also kind of relieved because this was bound to happen. We were actually looking forward, in a sense, to that in a deeper level, because it effectively takes us back to April 2019. It takes us back to the lead of the streets, but hopefully takes us back with lessons we've learned, with new allies, and with new tools to resist what happened, and with mistakes that we've learned, and we're definitely not planning to redo those same mistakes. So like I said, and like Muzan mentioned earlier, there was no escaping this coup, because to begin with, the coup was happening since 2019. This is how I see it. We have been in a coup since April 2019. And that coup, when happened, not Ibn Auf, the one after Ibn Auf, Burhan, it was under this banner of stopping the bloodshed. And the way I see it is this keyword of democratic transformation, the way I define it from my class stand is different from the way elites in Sudan define it. Literally in April 2019, the revolutionary war on the street, but elites will look at them and not see democracy, and will look at closed doors and whatever economical interest behind that and be like, no, this is democracy, that is not democracy. So if we wanna protect whatever democratic transformation and whatever civilian government, we should start thinking, what do we mean by that? And this is what is exciting about this second wave of the revolution. And this mentality of looking at the revolution and looking at the people of Sudan on the street and disclaiming their democratic process, taking away their voice and giving them to someone else, to some sort of a negotiator in the middle or some sort of like money interest. This is not, it's within the formation of the way we understand politics. It goes back deep to how we define politics and how we define political activism. For example, if we go back and just try to very quickly critique the FFC, Forces for Freedom and Change, or even the Sudanese Professional Association, we see, regardless of their intention, we don't care really about like what goes in your heart. We care about your action and how they affect the livelihood of other people. We've seen that over and over again, they keep missing the chance to actually build from below and to actually give meaning to their institution, give meaning to this terminology of democracy, and they still end up within like lowering the bar of the people. And this, and although consistently, I would say that the general, like the ordinary revolutionary on the street is gaining knowledge, learning lessons. If we go back to April 6th, going all back to what happened to April 11 and how Ibn Auf did not even stand a chance, and how even within the setting, how the chanting was advancing. We've seen chanting advancing, we've seen the movement advance to the point of the strike or the civil disobedience in May 28, May 29, 2019, and all the way up to earlier in 2021, when we've seen on the street slogans against neoliberals, against new colonial.
Over 1,000 people took to the streets in Washington, D.C. in support of the Sudanese resistance. And here's a political cartoon. Take a look at this headline from Middle East Eye. U.S. asks Israel to push Burhan to end the Sudan coup. Burhan is the nominal leader of the coup. The whole thing sounds bizarre unless you know that the United States uses Israel to work with regimes that are too violent or too racist for the U.S. to work with openly. From this article in the Israeli paper Haaretz by Yonatan Tuval, I'll read 2 sentences. Suspicion that Israeli officials were in the know about the plot, if not outright complicit in it, surfaced almost immediately following a report that a Sudanese security delegation had secretly visited Israel just weeks earlier. And this suspicion seemed all but validated in light of the revelation that an Israeli delegation, which included defense and Mossad representatives, traveled to Khartoum in the aftermath of the coup for talks on unspecified topics. What else is new? Across the Red Sea from Sudan is the country of Yemen. The Saudi, UAE, Obama, Trump, Biden war against Yemen continues, but there's been a major development. Yemeni forces, usually called the Houthis, seem on the point of surrounding the large city of Marib. It's the last city in the north controlled by those Yemenis allied with the Saudis and the UAE. Its fall would be a major event. For more, go to SaudiUS.org. From Yemen, a 1-minute video that shows the grit of the Houthi fighters. Pay attention to a man in a tiny circle of green, not deterred by a huge Saudi U.S. bomb that falls near him.
يجاهد يخرج من بين الركام. ولا جاء أي شيء.
Biden is going to sell the Saudis $650 million in new weapons. This after he sold them earlier this year $500 million in purely defensive weapons like attack helicopters. Back to Israel. On November 5th, its soldiers shot to death this 13-year-old. 13, barely a teenager. His name was Mohammad Da'adas. He was shot from over 150 feet away. He was from New Askar refugee camp near Nablus. 2 days earlier, the Israelis demolished this home to 15 Palestinians, including 7 children and teenagers. And a few days earlier, a home for 9 people in Jerusalem. That video comes from the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem. Save the date, Saturday, November 20th. That afternoon, Eastern Time, Promoting Enduring Peace will present its yearly Shafer Lecture, this time online. The speaker will be Christopher Shafer, activist and lecturer and researcher. His topic is The Revolution Will Be Plant-Based. He elaborates how our collective bigotry towards other animals fuels white supremacy. It's a provocative talk combining animal liberation and Black Lives Matter. See pepeace.org for details. We now turn to climate news. On October 30th, there was a rally on the steps of the Hartford Capitol building. A few days later, I interviewed the moderator of the event, Martha Klein. Klein is the lead of the Connecticut Sierra Club's Beyond Gas campaign.
So we rallied on the north steps of the Capitol, and it was small because of the rain, but the people who came out are the most dedicated and wonderful people. And we had people from communities of color, from Hartford, LGBTQ, Latinx, youth, basically all the groups that are most marginalized and most vulnerable to the economic and injustice and racism. We had speakers from the Nonprofit Accountability Group. Tanea Taylor is the executive director. We also had Michio Agresta, who's the president of Fridays for Future, Yukon. Kate Donnelly is a founder of No More Dirty Power in Killingly. And Diane Daniels spoke, who is a faith leader and a registrar of voters. We had the drumming group Ajali. Drums, Not Drugs is their logo. Mm-hmm. And we chanted and we formed a stronger movement. We built intersectional relationships. And we're very much eager to continue to work together across the boundaries.
What were some of the chants?
So yes, I sure do. We said up with liberation, down with all that racism. We said we want electricity powered by community. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of other ones, the sort of standard, what do you do when you're under attack? Stand up, fight back. I forgot. Mm-hmm. And we had a play. We actually did a skit that was performed by Governor Lamont, Commissioner Dykes, and a reporter. Mm-hmm. They were acting, and that was highly entertaining. And they almost all of the skit used words that Commissioner Dykes and Governor Lamont have spoken publicly. But when you hear them out of context, it sounds absurd. To talk about how you're trying to do something about the climate while you're approving hundreds of megawatts of frack gas infrastructure to be built.
And of course, all this is taking place just before the COP26, when leader after leader gets up and talks about how terrible things are, how much of an emergency it is, and so on and so forth. But in Connecticut, it's business as usual.
It very much is, and it's almost feels a bit ironic that it seems like President Biden may be a little bit more advanced than Governor Lamont on climate. I don't want to go out too far on a limb here by saying that, but President Biden has pledged us to the United States to the methane pledge to reduce methane emissions 30% by 2030. And while that's largely being called not sufficient, it's not nothing. Mm-hmm. But in Connecticut, what we have regarding methane is much worse than nothing. Much, much worse than nothing, because they're adding frack gas infrastructure. And it's not just, we always have to remind everyone, it's not just the brand new power plant that Lamont is trying so hard to deny and disassociate himself with. His administration amply approves public funding for frack gas appliances, for conversions to frack gas appliances. So in other words, all ratepayers in Connecticut are paying into a fund overseen by Energize-CT, which is overseen by DEEP, which gives money to subsidize people to buy more gas appliances. Our state is doing that. And our Energy Efficiency Board just the other week decided to continue business as usual. That is to say, more frack gas appliances.
See the full interview at thestrugglevideo.org. 2 days later, incredibly, there was very good news on climate. The regional energy group ISO New England decided it was taking too long for the Killingly fracked gas plant to be built. So it asked the federal government to pull the plug on the whole project. More on this in a future program. A tweet from Greta Thunberg. This is no longer a climate conference, it's a global corporate greenwash festival. And then she tweeted something she really admires. A huge protest crowd in Glasgow, Scotland. This is Tom Goldtooth at the COP26. Goldtooth is a leader of the Indigenous Environmental Network. Here he rails against the carbon credit system, where companies will be allowed to continue to pour greenhouse gas emissions into the air by supposedly offsetting them by paying a poor country to plant some trees. Goldtooth and Bill McKibben spoke about COP26 on Democracy Now! Earlier this week. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.